Welcome back to Inside Criminal Minds, the show dedicated to dissecting the actions of the Behavioral Analysis Unit's ability to catch serial killers. If you are new to the channel, there is a link into the description for the other videos. This episode starts with a kid singing, and if previous episodes are anything to go on, it doesn't look good for him. Then we see a point of view shot of the killer. Thankfully, Wally, the kid, is taken home before the killer strike in an extremely bloody mess. Next, the team goes over this murder and a previous one with two big differences. One was burglarized and eviscerated, and the other one was not, making them to believe it was two separate unsubs. When Gideon walks in with an injury, so he has to stay at the FBI headquarters, he assures them that this killer is the same one. Once they get to the house, they deduce that two people were there. One a junkie looking for medication, and the other the killer. Elle expertly figures out that Wally could have seen at least one of the unsubs. Unfortunately, they don't know which one when talking to Wally. Also, the mother is standoffish with the FBI's investigation, but Wally complies to Elle's questions. They use the information to narrow down the suspects for the junkie. Gideon is perplexed at the rings of blood on the floor, and Garcia is learning working with Gideon is going to be a pain. And unlike with Elle in a previous episode, Garcia doesn't assert herself and her space due to Gideon's leadership.
Get this stuff out of here. Get this out of here. Where's the blueprints of the house?
Oh, they're right here on the screen.
I don't want the blueprints on the screen. I want something I can hold on.
There you go.
It's hot in here. Can you fix it? How do you breathe in here? Turn it, make it a little cooler in here.
Yeah, it's pretty cold, but...
You have the autopsy reports?
I'm going to have the sheriff from Harringtonville fax it over as soon as they come in. Got it.
They're right here.
I'll get the coffee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, they narrow down the suspect list for the tweaker to be Domino, and hilariously, he thinks that he could outrun Derek Morgan. Of course, he's arrested and interrogated, and Elle uses intimidation to gain the advantage. After that, Morgan questions him further to prove Domino wasn't the killer, which works, but he's still arrested for the robbery. Gideon figures out what the rings are for after eating lunch, and jumping to conclusions that the unsub is drinking blood and or eating body parts. I mean, he is correct, but how does he know the killer isn't just some possible doctor or psychotic collector who is collecting the organs? During the profile, they figure out that the killer is a local or possibly a local who left and came back. And they canvass the funeral of one of the victims and find out Ole Manor was the closest to the profile, and an eyewitness testifies to seeing him and his brother and go to question them both. Oddly enough, Morgan doesn't try to de-escalate the situation, but it still works. Thankfully, they oblige, and the BAU gets the answers they need and convince the police of Ole's innocence. After that, we see Wally again singing, and it's like the unsub is following him, which is proven when Wally is kidnapped after the killing of the grandma. Hotch says no one heard a scream, however the sound effects say otherwise. Reed figures out the heart is missing, and Gideon infers that the unsub is getting high on God.
You gotta smoke, snort, inject, or swallow. Get in touch with God today. Smoke, snort, inject, or swallow. Did you forget? Let's count the ways. And then it repeats. Right after that.
Hey, you can't snort the Lord!
And Stowally, whom the unsub believes is an angel. The stomach is giving back to one of the families of the victim, showing remorse for the killing, leading the team to finding the unsub at a church. Of course, Morgan and Elle are at the church that the unsub goes to, and at least they now have him in custody. Unfortunately, Eddie Mays, the unsub, is too psychotic to explain anything to the team, which is a problem due to Wally still being missing. Hotch then talks to his mother, who was the eyewitness who saw Ole Manor, and complies to allow doctors to administer drugs to Eddie. Garcia finds out Eddie was a drug addict and a student of religion. Next, Morgan and Elle search Mrs. May's house and deduce that she destroyed evidence, but by destroying evidence, she creates more. And it doesn't help, she missed a few spots that look like the blood rings we saw before. Hotch then strong-arms the doctor to allow him to interrogate, shows how deeply he cares for the innocent life of the missing child. During the interrogation, Eddie is still not fully lucid, and the questions agitate his already fragile state of mind, and ultimately cannot confess to the atrocities he committed, and also sending him into a psychotic episode, becoming useless to the team. And due to the realization of what he did, Eddie decides to attempt suicide in his cell, showing remorse for the killing, but the team is there to save him, and Eddie goes to the hospital. Hotch then interrogates Eddie's mother, knowing she was privy to the actions, and she attempts to lie to save her good name and standing in the community. Morgan floats the idea to use the GPS to narrow down the potential spots for Wally, and Hotch uses his mother to help question Mrs. Mays, which also humanizes Hotch and his upbringing, not talked about in later seasons. Next, Elle explains how they got there, and Hotch tries to appeal to Mrs. May's humanity to no avail. But even without her, they find Wally safe and sound. We also get more information about what kind of father Hotch is and how bad a mother Mrs. Mays is, leading to her arrest. Finally, as the team return, Hotch has to console Garcia. Then Gideon and Hotch talk about his bucket list, which pushes Gideon to reconcile with his son we rarely, if ever, hear about in later episodes. This episode is one of the first episodes that separates the team, but it won't be the last. The team using GPS at the end is a smart way to find Wally and give the family a happy ending. This episode was good. It really shows how painful it is to work with Gideon in a different perspective than usual, and forces the rest of the team to pull up the slack. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe. Next week, I'm going to talk about a spy that got fired in a new series I'm calling Burn to Notice.